Hello, welcome back to the 1882 Club. After West Ham's cup final, didn't quite go how they wanted it to. It was a finished West Ham 1, Tottenham Hotspur 1 in a pretty forgettable game, really. In all honesty, it's just another frustrating result in the league, another poor result in the league. And I know we've got one eye on the game on Thursday, and rightly so, because it's a European competition and we're one game away from a European final. But we need to be building confidence going into these games, and we're just not. We're just not getting any form, any rhythm going from the league at all. Today, you'd think West Ham would be there for the taking, really. They've had no Graham Potter's had no bounce there at all, no new manager bounce. They've just been stuck in a similar situation to what we've been in all season. But we've had Europe and they haven't, and we need league results to give us a bit of a bounce, and they just haven't. I really did think we'd beat West Ham today, to be honest. And I know they've got some good players, Jared Bowen, Mohamed Kudus, Lucas Paquetá, but we never really looked like winning the game. If anything, actually West Ham probably looked better and looked more organised than Spurs did, which is a real worry for me. And I don't know if it's a worry for anyone else, that a team who's sitting in 17th look more organised than and Spurs do, and look probably a little bit better coached than Spurs do. And I know we're in 16th, but we should be better than them. But it is what it is. I know this game wasn't on TV. I have seen it. I did watch it. I did find it very hard to watch at times because Spurs just gave you no real hope or belief that they would get 3 points today. They just looked lethargic and slow and preoccupied, which you just don't want to see if you're a travelling fan. They did take an early lead though, with a first league goal for Wilson Odobert, 15 minutes, but it really wasn't anything that Spurs created. It wasn't free-flowing football, really. The goal just came from a really silly West Ham error. And I've been a big fan of Max Kilman, and I actually did think a few years ago when we were linked with him when he was at Wolves, I think it was under Conte, that we wanted him in the back three. I actually thought he'd be a good signing for Spurs. That he fulfilled the homegrown quota, and he was a Premier League experience, and he was solid. I think he's been really bad for West Ham, and I watched it back. I just still don't know what he's really trying to do. He's battling with Tell. He really should be winning it, but Tell just seems to want it more, and eventually he does win it. Nice little ball across the box. Wilson Odobert has got enough time to stick the ball in there. He could have had a cup of tea, could have sat down, had a picnic, and still put it in. But it's nice for him to get his first goal for the club. I do want to have a conversation about Wilson Odobert, because I really feel like with proper coaching, Odobert is the future for Spurs. And I think he's not come through our academy. He's not homegrown, but what he is he's young, he's quick, he's dynamic, he's got a load of tricks to him. And at Burnley last season, you saw he can score goals. He's capable of scoring goals. And I just would really like to see him develop under another manager, because I think Ange Postecoglou, and the biggest criticism I've had of Postecoglou is that he's not progressing the levels of the players at the club. In fact, a lot of them have regressed, and that's a damning thing for a manager. that he's not developing what he's got. Odobert is a young player who needs an arm around him and needs a coach to really get out of him what I'm sure he's capable of. Because he's been in and around the France under 21 setup and he's been quite influential in that side. And there's definitely a player there with that right coaching. He reminds me a bit, and maybe this is a bit hyperbolic, he reminds me a bit of a younger Sonny. If you remember when Son joined the club, he was a little bit raw, and in his first season, he showed glimpses of what he can do, but ultimately was a little bit inconsistent. And it was really in that second season when he was given a chance. I think Spurs were playing away at Stoke. Yeah, it would have been. It was away at Stoke. I think it was one of the first games of the season. He was trusted to start on the left wing, and he scored 2 goals in that game, and one particularly brilliant goal. And from then on, he's never really looked back, and he's been a brilliant player for Spurs. So, in that sense, Odobert, he reminds me of that. He's had a stop-start first season. He's had injuries, which is beyond his control. But I think with proper exposure to a proper coach who believes in him, Odobert could be a fantastic player for Spurs. Still a long way to go, but I really do believe he is the future on the wing for Tottenham. Matisse Tell, I thought he was bright today. He was certainly more effective than he was the other night when he just couldn't get in the game at all. He was in the game today and he did actually make things happen, but I think he does need to improve his decision making. He's still a young player again, a bit like Odobert really. He needs exposure to a top coach because you can see he's got ability and you can see he's a talented player, but I think he just needs that little bit of again, like an arm around the shoulder to try and get the most out of him and proper man management. And he's one of those players, again, I'm going to reserve judgment if Spurs do buy him and they do take up the option to buy him from Bayern Munich. I do think he would be better judged under another manager, not Ange Postecoglou, because he's one of those players that like Odobert, needs an arm around the shoulder and needs to be properly developed. But I thought he was bright today. He was buzzing around, got a nice assist for Odobert, had a chance in the second half that he should have done a little bit better with, but a nice burst of pace beyond, I think it was Todibo for them. Sometimes it's frustrating because on another day Spurs could have won that game comfortably 3 or 4-1. They had some chances there, but West Ham in their cup final they did get the equaliser not about 15 minutes after Spurs scored. We could not have made it any easier for them. It's not even like they've had to fashion a nice movement with lots of passes, or they've had a silky winger who's taken on a few Spurs players and had a moment of magic. It was just a simple ball between the lines that Spurs didn't cut out. And Jarrod Bowen, you cannot leave Jarrod Bowen on his own in the box like they did. He again, like Odobert, he could have had a cup of tea, picnic, and he probably could have gone to bed, woke up, and still put the ball in the net. He had that much time. And what was more insulting was he put the ball through Vicario's legs. I mean, Vicario's legs were like, I think someone summed it up perfectly on Twitter, that they were wider than Bonnie Blue's. Vicario. This last few months, Vicario has really gone from. I had respect for him, and I really did think that he was a player who could. He had a bit of vocal presence about him that we maybe didn't have with Loris in goal. But in these last few months, he's really starting to hack me off because at every opportunity, he's mouthing off about certain things, and he's called out the fans before, which never goes down well. And I think I summed this up on social media. I said if he had performances that matched his mouth, he'd be a world-class goalkeeper, because his performances aren't matching what he's saying, and he looks a bit silly. And today, Bowen put the ball through his legs. That's, for a goalkeeper, that's almost as bad as being beaten at your near post. Do we need to upgrade in that position in the summer? Yeah, I think we do. I think we do. And I don't like to say that, because I think Vicario is a good shot stopper. He showed that in the second half. There was a great header from a West Ham corner, I think, or free kick. I think Ward-Prowse put the ball in. Bowen got ahead to it, and it's a really good reaction save from Vicario, because otherwise it's going in and it's 2-1. So he's a good shot stopper, but the game's moved on from that. The game now is that the goalkeeper's got to be comfortable with his feet, and Vicario just isn't. He's just not comfortable with his feet at all, and that's a problem for Spurs, because and Postecoglou will want his players to play out from the back. He wants them to be brave on the ball, take risks, but you just can't take risks if you've got a goalkeeper who's going to distribute the ball to the opposition time and time again. Saw it against Bodo Glimt. We saw it against Liverpool, and we saw it again today, that he just isn't comfortable with his feet, and that's not good for Spurs. If you cast your mind back to the summer of 2023, and Spurs were linked and apparently had reportedly agreed personal terms with David Raya. Now, David Raya, at the time, I was all over that, because I think Raya is a fantastic goalkeeper. And then it emerged that Spurs weren't willing to pay what Brentford wanted, or they weren't willing to match Raya's demands, and the move was off. And it was emerged that we were linked with Vicario, and no one had heard of Vicario. And Vicario came in, and he looked a little bit uncomfortable with punching the ball, collecting crosses from corners or free kicks. Wasn't too bad with his feet compared to what we'd had before, but at the end of the day, we're almost 2 years on from that now, and has he improved on those aspects? I don't think he has. I just don't think he's developed his goalkeeping skills to any better standard than what he had when he came into the club, and that's a problem, because you've got Antonin Kinski in the background, a young goalkeeper who we bought in from Slavia Prague in January. And Kinski looks better from corners and coming out and either punching the ball or catching it. But is Kinski better with his feet? Maybe. But he's got a rick in him as well. And if you've got a bunch of goalkeepers at your club who have lots of errors in them, then it's going to perhaps make your defence a bit uneasy. And you do get that sense of Spurs that they're not defensively comfortable, and perhaps that's because they don't feel that they've got a comfortable goalkeeper behind them. I don't know. Maybe it's because they're not good enough, and that's. There's one defender I'm going to come on to about that in a moment, or maybe two, that are just not good enough at all. Actually, no, I'll go there now. Ben Davies. If I hear any other person describe Ben Davies as dependable, solid, good servant, or oh well, you can trust Ben. He's been there 11. He's been there 11 years nearly. He's been a really great player for Spurs over the years. If I hear any more of that, I'm going to flip my lid, because Ben Davies is god awful. He's so bad, and it is criminal how he's been allowed to stay at Spurs this long. I'm going to say it now. Ben Davies should have been sold about 5 or 6 years ago. But no, he's been allowed to fester at the club, and he's gone through manager after manager after manager for I don't know what reason. Maybe he works hard in training and they think, oh, well, that will translate on the pitch. The bloke can't defend. He can't attack. He offers nothing. He's not a leader. He's certainly not. He should not be starting as a centre back in a back four for a start. And then he's been tried out at left back under Ange. He couldn't be inverted because he wasn't good enough, and he was hooked at half time. It was against Crystal Palace, and that was on the run we were on when we won 10. We won most of the first 10 games under Ange Postecoglou. Ben Davies has to be sold this summer, or he's got to be told, right, time's time now. You need to leave. You're not in my plans. Because again today, he could have given away a penalty in the first half. The ball came in from the West Ham's right hand side. I think it might have been Jarrod Bowen who put the ball in. And it looks like it hits Ben Davies on the arm. His arm's out. It doesn't need to be. And that's a basic of defending, is that just nowadays, especially with VAR and the scrutiny on players with replays and different camera angles, keep your arms by your side. Don't put them in an unnatural position, because you're going to give the referee a decision to make. And he's very fortunate that he got away with it, in my opinion. And on another day, that could have been a penalty, and West Ham probably take the lead in the game. Yeah, Ben Davies. Why is he still here? The other player I want to touch on, I just think as maybe it's difficult to say whether he's not good enough or whether it's a case of, like many others at the club at the moment, he's regressed. Is Jed Spence. And Jed Spence, when he came into the side, looked to make an impact. He looked busy, and he looked like he wanted to prove a point to the manager and those who have said, well, maybe Jed Spence needs to be moved on now. He's not really had any consistency at Spurs. He's been on loan, Leeds and Genoa and Rennes. But we're getting to the point now where Spence is starting to look a bit poor. He was really poor today. Just couldn't cope with Jarrod Bowen. And again, that's not an easy feat because Bowen's a very good player. But he just looked so nervous and looked like he just didn't know what he was doing out there. And he's played left back quite a few times this season. Covered for a doggy quite admirably and has played well in a large majority of those games. But the last few weeks when he's been playing, he has not looked good. In fact, he started to look like the Jed Spence that we believed he was at the beginning of this season or even last season, which is a player who's, with all due respect, not quite good enough for Spurs and not good enough for the standards that we should be expecting. And strangely enough, I looked on the player ratings and they gave him a 7. And I thought that can't be right. He wasn't very good at all. He let Bowen go far too easily for the goal. He didn't even track him. He was just sort of stood there, just watching as the ball was played through the lines by Wan-Bissaka. he just didn't even really make an effort to try and track back and stop any shot coming in from Bowen. Yeah, it wasn't a good display from Spence today, not at all. And I'm not digging him out deliberately because I think he's I think he's a good, honest player, but I do get the sense beneath Spence that there's a bit of a troubled individual, that or a bit of an immature individual, because and Neil Warnock said before that he needs to improve his work ethic, and I think he has. I think he's worked hard this season. I think he's at times earned his right to be playing for Spurs. But I mean, remember if you see all that Rio Ferdinand interview, he just looked, and some of the stuff he was saying in that interview, I got the sense he's a little bit immature, and I don't think you need that right now, particularly with this position Spurs are in. You need someone who's going to stand up and give their best and give 100% every time, and I just don't get that impression with Jed Spence at all. And I think that's a worry going forward for Spurs. The other worry, moving away from the defence, the other worry for Tottenham at the moment is, well, two injuries really. Lucas Bergvall, who's been ruled out for the season. I think we knew that last on Thursday when there was some confusion around that. I think he's now been confirmed to be out for the season. The bigger worry for me is today that there was emerging news that the injury to James Maddison is looking quite severe. And it's looking like he's going to be out for the season. Estimate possibly 2 to 3 months. And that's a bit of a worry because James Maddison is one of the few players in that midfield who is dynamic and looks to go forward and looks to make things happen. Linked to this is the form of Dejan Kulusevski. Or I should say lack of form, because at times today he looked like he was running in concrete or treacle. He was certainly being he looked like he was being held back, and he had no pace. Sluggish performance from him, and we're not really used to seeing it that much because Kulusevski this season has been really good for a lot of the games. He's really made an impact. But that injury he suffered looks like it looks like he's set him back quite a lot, and maybe he was rushed back too early. I don't know. But the fact that Maddison's injured now means that Kulusevski has to fill in that void as the Metzala or the number 10 in this system. And his lack of form and Maddison's obvious quality on the ball makes it a bit of a worry for Spurs going forward, because I'm just starting to think about where's the creativity coming from in this system. Because we know Kulusevski can do it. We know he's good enough. But if he's not in form, then the whole midfield unit becomes a little bit dysfunctional. And we've got a big game on Thursday night in Bodo Glimt, who are going to be, with a home crowd behind them, they're going to be up for it. They're going to be at Spurs. They've got their players coming back, key players. So they're going to be, it's going to be a big test for Tottenham. And they need a midfield that's going to be stood up to the pressure. It's going to be resilient, and it's going to have to put up a fight. And if Kulusevski's not in form, then it's putting a lot of pressure on the other two midfielders. It's probably going to be Bentancur is certainly one of them, and I would guess he's going to stick with Bissouma. But he could play Sarr. Sarr had a decent game today. He had a really nice shot, I think, in the sort of mid part of the second half. Curled one just over the bar. Good save, actually, from Areola. Don't think it was going in, but he wasn't to know that. And Sarr, to me, is more of the Bergvall type player. And I think he would be a better fit in the system if, with the lack of form of Kulusevski, I think Sarr would be the better option. But I could see him going for Bissouma just for the experience. We'll have to wait and see. We don't know. But I think it's becoming a worry for Spurs that Kulusevski's not in form. And yeah, that's a problem going forward. Certainly going to be a problem for Thursday night. I'm going to give my player ratings from today. Before we move on to have a look at preview the massive game on Thursday night, the biggest game of the season so far, and probably, if it doesn't go well, the defining game of the Postecoglou era. So, player ratings today: Vicario did not play well at all. Far too easily beaten for Bowen's goal. 5. Jed Spence, awful game, really poor. Just looked lazy and tired, and yeah, probably immature again. I'm going to give Jed Spence a 4. Ben Davis, 4. Well, I've said all I need to say on Ben Davis. Kevin Danso, I thought was the better of the defenders. Didn't have a huge amount to do. I say a 6 for Danso. I do quite like Kevin Danso, and I do hope that he becomes a more regular starter in the team than he has been, because I think what he may lack in technical ability, he makes up for in effort, and he just puts his body on the line, which is what I think a good centre back should do. And he's not afraid to get stuck in, and I like that. And I don't think we have enough of that in the squad at the minute. So yeah, I think a 6 for Danso. Archie Gray, probably a 5 for Archie Gray. Again, didn't have a huge amount to do. Could have been a little bit better going forward, but yeah, he's a young player. He needs to find a settled position, because he's been, and that's not his fault, he's been moved around a lot this season in centre back role, in left back role, right back role. He's hardly played in midfield. He just needs a settled role and just needs to stick to that role and play that role week in, week out for him to be better. Whether he needs a loan next season, I don't know. Because he was playing earlier this season, he was playing a pretty decent standard for an 18-year-old in the Premier League. And so on that one hand, you could see him staying, but the other hand, maybe it would be better for him to go, and I think he'd need a Premier League loan. And with a Premier League loan, he'd develop his physicality and he'd play week in, week out and get used to the pace of football in the Premier League in just one position, rather than being moved around constantly just to fulfill situations where injuries have arisen. So I'd say a 5 for Archie Gray today. Kulusevski, 4, looked slow, he looked ponderous, just didn't have any impact on the game. That's a shame for him, but he needs to buck his ideas up quickly, because he's a key player for Spurs. He's an experienced player, and he is and has been one of the talismanic figures this season for Spurs. Bissouma 6. Played all right. Bissouma did a decent enough job, but he needs to work on his shooting because he was some of his shots from outside the box are wayward. They're terrible. I can't remember who it was on X summed it up and said that if your family depended on Yves Bissouma scoring a goal from outside the box, which member of your family are you saying goodbye to first? Which sort of is a pretty accurate representation, bit of a flippant one, but certainly pretty accurate. Perhaps Sarr had a good game, I thought. I'll give him a 7. I thought he was bright in midfield. He had the energy, which we needed, and he had a couple of good efforts. The one I've already described was a bit unlucky, but he looked to make an impact and he looked to make chances. So I'll give him a 7. Odobert, I think he was the best player on the pitch. Took his goal well, even though it was a little bit of a tap in. Took his goal well, and hopefully that'll give him some confidence. He's a tricky player, and I do like him. I think he's got a bright future, and I think he was the best player on the pitch today. I'll give him a 7. Richarlison, probably a 6, or maybe even a 5. Didn't really have a lot to do. Was taken off in the end for Mikey Moore, who we haven't seen for quite some time. Mikey Moore, he came on 23 minutes on the pitch for him. Didn't really have that much that he could do, but he's only 17. Can't really judge him that well at the minute. He needs a lot more minutes. Tell was buzzing. He was bright. I'll give him a 6.5. Bit wasteful in front of goal, which I think he'll need to be brushed up on. But I'd wait to judge that with a new coach. I think I see a lot of Spurs fans on about Tell and saying that we shouldn't buy him. He's certainly a divisive player because some say that we should buy him and some say that we shouldn't. I can see both sides. I thought he'd have more of an impact than he has had, Tell. And I don't think he's a bad player at all. But again, like perhaps a bit like Archie Gray, he needs a defined role within the team. Because sometimes he's playing through the middle, sometimes he's playing out wide on the left, like he was today. He's clearly got pace. He's got an eye for goal. And I think if he was given time in a defined role, I think he could be a good fit for Spurs. I think on the left, with Son coming towards the sort of the twilight years of his career, and given the fact that he hasn't had a good season this year compared to the high standards he's set, then Tell could be that player. But then how does that affect someone like Wilson Odobert, who is also a left-footed player? But I know Wilson Odobert can play both sides, but predominantly he's left. You've also got Mikey Moore who plays that side. And what does that do for his development? So if I was making a decision on Tell, I would buy him. But what I would do is I'd want the fee with Bayern Munich to be reduced, because I think it's currently set at around 60 million euros. That's way too much. Way too much. I'd want it at around 40 maybe, because he's got potential. And I think another manager could unlock that potential. But again, we don't know who that will be if there is a new manager, because if Spurs win the Europa League somehow, I can't see them sacking Ange. And the only other choice is he decides to leave. but if he's just won a European competition, why would he? So it's all swings and roundabouts at the moment. Yeah, Tell was bright and yeah, 6.5 is probably about right, I think, for Matisse Tell. So we've got to look ahead really to Thursday and the big game against Bodo Glimt. I'll be honest. I mean, if you listen to the last episode, I was quite positive actually about Spurs, and I thought they played well at home, and they've got a lead that they're taking to Norway. But that I think two things in the last few days have made me worry a little bit about this game. The first is Maddison's injury, which came today. Maddison was the best player on the pitch on Thursday night. Easily. The fact that he's not there, and as I've said, the Kulusevski form and the Kulusevski conundrum, that makes me worry a bit that there's going to be no creativity there, and that if Solanke's back, which we don't know for definite, if he's back, then these players are going to be feeding off scraps, and that's not what you want. Because I think Spurs will need a goal in Norway, and I can't see them stopping Bodo Glimt scoring. Bodo Glimt are a strong side at home. We've seen them in the Europa League. They've beaten Lazio in the last fixture 2-0 at home. And Lazio are a strong side in that competition. They finished top of the group stage. So they're going to be a difficult team to face on a plastic pitch where Spurs aren't used to. They're not used to playing on synthetic surfaces. That's going to be, and that's not an excuse because they should be, in terms of the quality they've got, they should have more than enough. But it's a different type of football completely to what they're used to. And as I said in the last podcast, the last time we saw Spurs play on a synthetic pitch was against Tamworth, non-league Tamworth in the FA Cup, and that non-league side took the Premier League Tottenham to extra time, and at the end could have won it. So again, this is not going to be an easy game, and the other issue I think is just the lack of form in the league. And they've got no rhythm going at all. They've got no confidence coming into any of these games. And yes, in the last round they did well to beat Frankfurt away, but Frankfurt missed a hatful of chances at the end of that game. And Rasmus Christensen with some criminal misses. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult game. And if Bodo Glimt get an early goal, then it's going to make life difficult for Tottenham. No doubt about it. And we've got to be on our guard the whole game. We can't go there with the naivety of thinking that we can just turn up and win, because on paper Bodo Glimt don't have the quality of players that we do, and we've seen Spurs do that before loads of times. We've seen Spurs go in to these sort of games looking cocky and thinking that they've got the game won just because they've taken a lead to the team we're playing. And it's the game that springs to mind is Dinamo Zagreb a few years ago, and that game still gives me PTSD. So Bodo Glimt have got they're not playing this weekend, so they're going to be well rested, and no doubt Knutsen will have them working on drills to try and stop Spurs, because Ange has already basically come out and said that we're not going to do anything any different, and we're going to play the same way we've played all season because it's done us well in the cup. And Yeah, well, I think the phrase "live by the sword, die by the sword" comes to mind for this one. I still think Spurs will get it done. My gut obviously wants Spurs to get it done, but yeah, it's gonna be a hard slog. I think the phrase goes. Um, I don't know what anyone thinks. Like, leave comments if you think what you think Spurs are going to do. And I'd love to be sitting here on Thursday night, Friday morning, whenever I film the podcast, and say, look, we're in a European final, and we've got a first chance of some European silverware since 1984. So that's what I'd like to happen. But the realist in me thinks that the way this season's gone, it's been a disgrace of a season. That Spurs aren't going to get it done, and that Bodo Glimt are going to make Spurs pay for conceding that late goal that they did on Thursday, which was just such a silly goal to give away. But who knows? We don't know. We'll wait and see. That, I think, is enough for today. It's a pretty forgettable game. I don't think it's one that Spurs fans are going to dwell on for too long. I know it's West Ham. I know they're one of our biggest rivals, really, along with Chelsea and Arsenal. But I think the quicker we forget about the game, the better. And just let's hope that on Thursday, Spurs give us something to look forward to and something to make us celebrate what could be a successful season ultimately. Even though we've been dreadful in the league, we could have our hands on a European trophy. So we'll wait and see. But thank you for listening to the 1882 Club. Remember to follow us on social media. We are on X, we're on Instagram, on BlueSky, and on Threads. So if you haven't followed us already, then please make sure that you do. All the details are on our social media page. And all it left for me to say is thank you very much for listening and hope you have a lovely week.